Picture this. An early autumn morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, casting long shadows across a modest neighborhood in rural Georgia. Michael Reeves, a 52-year-old veteran with graying hair at his temples and calloused hands, stands at the end of his driveway, arms crossed over his chest. Before him idles a sleek black SUV, windows tinted so dark they reflect his own tense expression back at him. Behind the wheel sits a man in an immaculate suit, his face hidden behind designer sunglasses despite the early hour. "Mr. Reeves," the man says, rolling down his window just enough to be heard, "I believe we have a mutual acquaintance." The veteran's jaw tightens, his eyes narrowing as the man continues. "A Ms. Denise Washington? I understand you assisted her yesterday." Michael says nothing, his silence hanging in the air between them like smoke. "She sent me to deliver something." "To you," the man continues, reaching for something beside him, just out of view. Michael's hand instinctively moves to his hip, where for 18 years of military service, a sidearm would have rested. The man in the SUV notices, and his lips curl into what might be a smile. "I'd like you to come with me, sir." Little did Michael know, this unexpected visitor would change everything. "Let me take you back to where it all began." 24 hours earlier, Michael had been driving home from his shift at the local hardware store, where he'd worked since retiring from the Army 7 years ago. The evening was cooling down, the Georgia heat finally relenting as twilight approached. He'd earned the respect of everyone at Carter's Hardware for his encyclopedic knowledge of tools, building materials, and home repair solutions. Customers specifically asked for the Major, his nickname from regular patrons who appreciated his patience in explaining complicated projects. That evening, Michael was behind the wheel of his prized possession, a restored 1967 Ford Mustang, painted military green in honor of his service. He'd spent 3 years rebuilding it from near scrap, sourcing original parts and painstakingly restoring every inch. The car wasn't just transportation, it was therapy, helping him process the memories from 3 tours overseas that sometimes still woke him in the night. The purr of the Mustang's engine was interrupted by the sight of hazard lights blinking on the shoulder ahead. As he slowed down, he saw a woman standing beside a newer model sedan, a tow cable in her hands, looking frustrated as cars whizzed past without stopping. Without hesitation, Michael pulled over. "Having some trouble?" he called out as he approached. The woman turned, relief washing over her face. She was perhaps in her early 40s, dressed in business attire, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun. A lanyard with credentials hung around her neck. "Thank God," she said. "I've been trying to flag someone down for 20 minutes. She gestured to her car. "Transmission just gave out. I called for a tow, but they're backed up. Said they could get here faster if I could move it to the access." "A road." Michael nodded, already assessing the situation. "I'm Michael," he said, extending his hand. "Denise Washington," she replied, shaking it firmly. "I really appreciate this. I'm already late picking up my daughter from her program, and my phone's about to die." As Michael prepared to help her, he didn't notice the black SUV that slowed as it passed, the driver observing the scene with unusual interest before continuing down the highway. It took about 30 minutes, but Michael successfully helped Denise move her car to an easier location for the tow truck. He even called a buddy who owned a garage to expedite the service and offered to drive her to pick up her daughter. "You're a lifesaver, honestly," Denise said as they drove. "Most people wouldn't stop these days, especially," she trailed off. "Especially?" Michael prompted. Denise sighed. "Let's just say as a black woman on a rural Georgia highway, the cars that did slow down didn't exactly make me feel safer." Michael nodded, understanding. "Army taught me one thing for sure. You never leave anyone behind, regardless of who they are." "Army? I should have guessed." She smiled. "My brother served. Marines." They chatted easily for the next 15 minutes. Denise was an executive at a tech company in Atlanta, commuting back and forth a few times a week. Her daughter was in an advanced science program at a school 20 miles from their home. When they arrived at the school, a young girl of about 12 rushed over, looking worried until she saw her mother. "Mom, you're super late. I thought something happened." "Something did, baby, but Mr. Reeves here helped me out." Denise turned to Michael. "I can't thank you enough. Please, let me repay you somehow." Michael waved her off. "No need. Just glad to help." As they exchanged numbers, Denise insisting she wanted to properly thank him, Michael noticed a sleek black SUV parked across the street, its engine running. Something about it made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, an old soldier's instinct he'd learned to trust. But the moment passed, and he dismissed it as paranoia that occasionally still surfaced. "I'll call you tomorrow," Denise promised, as he left. "My company might be interested in your skills, actually." We're always looking for reliable people with leadership experience. Michael smiled and waved goodbye, driving back to his modest but well-maintained ranch house on the outskirts of town. His home sat on 3 acres of land, not a lot by country standards, but enough to give him the peace and quiet he needed. The property was his sanctuary, meticulously maintained with a workshop behind the house where he restored furniture and worked on mechanical projects. That night, he fell asleep thinking about Denise's gratitude, feeling good about the simple act of helping someone in need. He didn't notice the black SUV that cruised slowly past his house just before midnight, its headlights off. The next morning, Michael was enjoying his coffee on the front porch when the same black SUV turned into his long driveway. It moved with deliberate slowness, gravel crunching under its tires. Michael set down his coffee, instantly alert. In 18 years of military service and 7 years of civilian life, he'd developed a keen sense for when something wasn't right. The SUV stopped about 20 feet from his porch. The driver's window lowered, revealing a man in his 30s wearing an expensive suit and sunglasses. Without waiting for an invitation, the man stepped out of the vehicle. "Michael Reeves?" His voice had a clipped, professional quality. "That's me," Michael replied, not moving from his position on the porch. "Something I can help you with?" The man approached, his shoes, clearly not made for country gravel, crunching on the drive. "I represent Ms. Washington's interests." He reached into his jacket and produced a business card which he held out. "Jackson Miller, Executive Security, Horizon Technologies." Michael didn't take the card immediately. "Executive Security? Denise in some kind of trouble?" Miller's expression didn't change. "No trouble. Ms. Washington holds a sensitive position at Horizon. When she interacts with unexpected individuals, we follow up." "Unexpected individuals," Michael repeated, his voice flat. "You mean veterans who stop to help women stranded on highways?" "I mean unknown variables, Mr. Reeves." Miller's tone remained professional, but there was an underlying dismissiveness that set Michael's teeth on edge. "Ms. Washington has access to proprietary information worth billions. We need to ensure that those she interacts with are properly vetted." Now Michael took the card, studying it. Embossed logo, high-quality paper. It looked legitimate. "So you're here to vet me, on my own property, at 7 in the morning. Just a brief background assessment, sir. Standard procedure." Miller gestured to the SUV. "If you'd be willing to come to our local office, we can complete the process quickly and compensate you for your time." Michael's instincts were screaming. "Now, how about this? You call Denise right now and confirm this is all above board. Put her on speaker." For the first time, Miller looked slightly uncomfortable. "Ms. Washington is in meetings all morning, but she's aware of our protocols." "Then come back when she's available," Michael said, standing up. "Until then, I think we're done here." Miller's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Mr. Reeves, you don't understand the sensitivity of this situation. Ms. Washington mentioned you expressed interest in employment opportunities at Horizon. That won't be possible without proper clearance." "Don't recall asking for a job," Michael replied, his voice hardening. "What I do recall is helping someone in need and expecting nothing in return." Miller's jaw tightened. "Very well, but I should warn you. Refusing our vetting process will be noted." He reached for the card in Michael's hand. "I'll take that back then." Michael kept the card. "Think I'll hold on to this, for my records." As Miller returned to his vehicle, he paused at the door. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Reeves. One way or another." The SUV backed down the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Michael watched until it disappeared from view, then went inside and immediately pulled out his phone to call Denise. The call went straight to voicemail. He left a brief message asking her to call him back about the visitor he'd just received. Over the next 3 days, Michael's concern grew. Denise never returned his call. When he tried reaching her again, the number was disconnected. He searched online for Horizon Technologies and found it was indeed a legitimate tech company specializing in cybersecurity and defense contracts. Exactly the kind of place that might have heightened security protocols. But something still felt off. On the 4th day after helping Denise, Michael returned home from work to find his front door slightly ajar. He approached cautiously, years of training kicking in. Inside, the house appeared untouched, but Michael knew better. Small things were out of place. A book angled differently on the shelf, the throw pillow on his couch indented as if someone had sat there. In his office, his computer was running, though he distinctly remembered shutting it down. Michael checked his security system, which showed no recorded activity during the day. Someone had disabled it. Professional job. The next morning, Miller's black SUV returned, this time pulling directly up to the porch. Miller stepped out, accompanied by another man in a similar suit. "Mr. Reeves," Miller called out, not waiting for Michael to come outside. We need to continue our discussion from the other day. Michael opened the door but remained in the doorway. You broke into my house. Miller didn't deny it. A security assessment, standard procedure. There's nothing standard about trespassing, Michael replied. I want you off my property. Now. The second man stepped forward. Sir, we have reason to believe you're in possession of company property belonging to Horizon Technologies. What are you talking about? Ms. Washington's personal device went missing shortly after your interaction with her, Miller said. Our tracking software indicates it was activated from this location. Michael almost laughed. You're accusing me of stealing her phone? I helped her move her car and gave her a ride. That's it. Then you won't mind if we conduct a brief search of the premises, the second man said, already moving toward the door. Michael blocked his path. Not without a warrant, you won't. Miller sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. Mr. Reeves, we're trying to handle this discreetly. Horizon would prefer to avoid involving law enforcement. That makes two of us, Michael replied, because I'd have to explain how you broke into my house yesterday. A flash of surprise crossed Miller's face, quickly concealed. I'd advise against making unfounded accusations. Nothing unfounded about it. I have security cameras hidden around the property. Military habit. This was a bluff. Michael's visible security system was the only one he had, but Miller wouldn't know that. Miller and his colleague exchanged glances. We'll be back, Mr. Reeves, with proper documentation. As they left, Michael knew this wouldn't end here. Something much bigger than a missing phone was at play. That afternoon, Michael drove to the local police station and spoke with Sheriff Dan Taylor, an old friend who'd served in the National Guard. So these corporate types are harassing you? Dan asked after hearing the story. About some missing phone? That's what they claim, Michael replied. But it doesn't add up. They disabled my security system to search my house. That's not how legitimate security firms operate. Dan leaned back in his chair. Horizon Technologies is a big deal. They've got government contracts, serious connections. If they're sending people after you, there must be a reason. The only connection I have to them is helping one of their executives with car trouble, Michael insisted. I never took anything from her. What about this woman, Denise? Can't you clear this up through her? Michael shook his head. Her number's disconnected. I can't find any mention of her online, even though she supposedly holds an executive position. Dan frowned. That's odd. Look, I'll run the plates on that SUV, see what comes up. In the meantime, document everything. If they come back, call me immediately. When Michael returned home, he found fresh tire tracks leading around to the back of his property. They hadn't just returned. They'd circled his entire property line. The message was clear. We're watching you. That night, Michael sat at his kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down everything he could remember about his interaction with Denise. As he reconstructed the events, something nagged at him. Her car trouble had seemed genuine. The tow truck had arrived as expected. He'd even spoken briefly with the driver, who confirmed he'd been sent by the garage Michael had called. But what if the whole scenario had been staged? What if Denise, or whoever she really was, had targeted him specifically? Michael pulled out his laptop and began researching. First, he looked up his own name and was surprised at how much information was readily available. His military service record, his address, even photos from community events. Anyone could have known he lived in the area and traveled that particular route home from work. Next, he searched for Horizon Technologies security breach and found several recent news articles about the company experiencing a cybersecurity incident 3 weeks earlier. The articles were vague, but reading between the lines, Michael suspected the company had lost sensitive data. As dawn approached, Michael had formed a theory. Denise wasn't from Horizon at all. She'd targeted him to establish a connection to him, possibly to frame him for something. The question was, why? The answer came later that day, in the form of an email from an anonymous address. Major Reeves, Horizon is after the wrong person. Denise Washington doesn't exist. The woman you helped is Sandra Myers, former Horizon employee terminated 3 weeks ago. She stole proprietary AI code and has been selling it to competitors. She's using you as a diversion. Check your Mustang carefully. A friend. Michael immediately went to his garage. His Mustang sat exactly as he'd left it, but now he examined it with new eyes. He checked under the hood, around the wheel wells, beneath the chassis. Nothing obvious. Then he remembered, when he'd helped Denise, or Sandra, move her car, she'd briefly had access to his Mustang while he was hooking up the tow cable. He began methodically taking apart sections of the interior. Behind the dashboard, secured with electrical tape, he found a small black device about the size of a credit card. A tracking device, certainly, but potentially more. Maybe a data storage device containing stolen information. Michael didn't touch it. Instead, he took photos from multiple angles, then carefully replaced everything and closed up the car. He sent the photos to Dan with a brief explanation and asked him to contact the FBI's cybercrime division. While waiting for Dan's response, Michael noticed something else. His home computer was running sluggishly. He ran a security scan and discovered spyware that had been installed recently. Someone wasn't just tracking his movements, they were monitoring his communications. Instead of removing the spyware, Michael decided to use it. He began creating a digital trail, fake web searches about selling technology, bogus emails drafted, but not sent about meeting potential buyers. If Sandra Myers had planted the tracking device in his car and was monitoring his computer activity, she'd see all of this. Dan called back that evening. FBI is interested. Very interested. Turns out Horizon has been working on classified AI technology for the Department of Defense. They want you to continue as normal while they set up surveillance. Tell them I'm already laying a trap, Michael replied. Whoever planted that device will be coming back for it. 2 days later, Michael's security system alerted him to movement on his property at 2 a.m. Checking the cameras, he saw a figure moving stealthily toward his garage. He called Dan, who assured him that FBI agents were already in position around his property. Michael watched through his window as the figure, a woman, entered his garage and went straight to the Mustang. Even in the low light, he recognized her, Denise Washington, or rather, Sandra Myers. As she retrieved the device from behind his dashboard, floodlights suddenly illuminated the entire garage. FBI agents converged from all sides. Sandra attempted to flee, but was quickly apprehended. By morning, the full story emerged. Sandra Myers had indeed been a senior developer at Horizon Technologies, until being terminated for suspicious activities. She'd stolen advanced AI code worth billions on the market, but needed a way to transport and sell it without being caught. Her plan had been to plant the storage device on an innocent third party, Michael, and direct Horizon's security team toward him while she arranged the sale. Miller and his associate weren't actually Horizon Security at all, but private investigators Sandra had hired to maintain her cover story and keep Michael distracted. The real Horizon Security team had been searching for Sandra all along. 1 month later, Michael sat on his porch enjoying his morning coffee. His phone rang, a representative from Horizon Technologies, offering a substantial reward for his help in recovering their stolen property and apprehending Sandra Myers. They also offered him a legitimate job in their physical security division. Impressed by his instincts and handling of the situation, Michael accepted the reward, but declined the job. His quiet life in rural Georgia suited him just fine. Besides, he had a new project, upgrading his home security system. Some habits from military service never quite fade away. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Michael worked in his garage, installing a state-of-the-art alarm system in his Mustang. The car no longer just represented his past. It now symbolized his ability to adapt, overcome, and protect what was his. A reminder that sometimes helping a stranger can lead down unexpected paths, some dangerous, some rewarding, but all part of the journey. 1 year later, Michael's story had become something of a local legend. The hardware store where he worked saw an increase in customers, many of whom came in hoping to meet the Major and hear his story firsthand. He always downplayed his role, emphasizing instead the importance of community vigilance and looking out for one another. Sandra Myers was serving time for corporate espionage and fraud. Horizon Technologies had completely revamped their security protocols. And Michael? He'd used part of the reward money to start a veterans support group in town, creating a network of former service members who could help each other transition to civilian life while putting their unique skills to good use. The black SUV that had once seemed so threatening was now parked in Michael's driveway, a gift from Horizon's CEO, who had personally apologized for the ordeal Michael had endured. Michael had initially refused it, but eventually accepted on the condition that it be used for the veterans group's activities. On quiet nights, when the memories of his military service or the Myers incident kept him awake, Michael would sit on his porch and reflect on how quickly life can change. One moment of kindness on a highway had cascaded into a corporate espionage plot, which in turn had led to a stronger community and purpose. His phone buzzed with a text message from Dan. Another vet just moved to town. Army, 3 tours like you. Thought you might want to welcome him to the group. Michael smiled. The circle continues. Have you ever stopped to help someone and found yourself caught up in something much bigger than you expected? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Has an act of kindness ever led you down an unexpected path? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this tale of how one veteran's good deed turned into an unexpected adventure, Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where ordinary people find themselves in extraordinary circumstances. Remember, sometimes the most important battles we fight aren't on foreign soil but right in our own backyards.